speaker is Sara Khan, and the person introducing Sara will be Dr. Mariam Basif Khan, who is Associate Professor of Comparative Literature at LUMS. She's the author of Who is a Muslim, um, a book that rethinks the entire history of Urdu literature. She very graciously and very generously offered to introduce Sara. Um, and just at that moment when I had started writing her introduction, and I'll just tell you how my first paragraph of Sara's introduction, it began with this anecdote which took place at a literary festival many years ago before I had published a book. And introducing me was this gentleman who's obviously a published writer. He said, "This is Bilal Tanveer, the most famous writer in Pakistan who's never published a book." And so I'm inclined to say something similar about Sara, except that she's not famous. But she is much more, she is actually brilliant and talented. So I'm inclined to say that the most brilliant and talented writer in Pakistan who has never published a book. She will be introduced by.
Okay, so actually, no, guys, let me just correct Bilal. Sara is very famous, and that's why I'm here. I'm here precisely for that reason. Okay. And I'm really very delighted to be here, mostly because usually I am introducing Sara Salim Jhagra to random students who don't know anything about her and who haven't met her, probably won't meet her, and who probably ascribe my joyful ramblings about her writing and my outing of her LUMS GPA, which I regularly out, as those of a professor who's growing old and has trouble dealing with Gen Z. So for once, I am delighted to have an audience who can put a face and a person to the name and is, at least partially interested in Sara. But, as I said, I talk about her all the time. In every class that I teach. She is among the students who have done the best work for me and perhaps brought out the best in me as a teacher. She has written academic essays, non-fiction essays for my classes, taught my many freshmen and sophomores how to write for a grammar Nazi. I'm not sure that term is PC anymore, but has also went along to chase after random unpaid projects I made her do with me, like, "Oh, Sara, let's do a class in the evenings where we teach anyone who wants to learn how to write. And here Sara and I would find ourselves in a random auditorium making new friends at random evenings in LUMS way back in, I think, 2017. Sara, was it 2018? Okay. So it's a while ago. I look back on those days where Sara was my student and then TA as a lovely adventure in teaching and writing and friendship. I'm sure Sara looks back on the same with some shoutings and angry emails added. I believe I sent one while I was on vacation and a final paper hadn't been turned in, and I spent hours bitching with Ali Raza and Bilal about how this girl doesn't turn in papers and she really irritates me, and now I'll have to fail her. I will fail her. I never failed her. But anyhow, this is how it was always. It was this kind of what you guys Gen Z calls a toxic cycle, but it was not toxic at all. It was really the great frustration, really lovely frustration for me. Above all, though, Sara is my friend and a writer who doesn't write. Whenever we meet, usually once or twice a year, the conversations are endless, and I feel like I'm reunited with family. Sara and Sana. Sana is Sara's other half. She is never without Sana, and Sana is never without Sara, showed up in our apartment in October 2020, and I don't know why or how. And I remember handing her a spoon and a baby who was starting solids, and I said, "Sara, please feed him because you probably know this stuff better than me, and we'll talk later." And that's exactly what happened. And one of my great memories is of Sara feeding my child and us catching up and me not knowing what's going on, because Sara has raised many children. I have, I have raised best, or am raising less children. Our conversations are always ongoing and changing with the times and phases of our lives. voice. But every time I see Sara, I ask where her writing is. Actually, I used to ask that. Now I just kind of yell and I say, "Jab tum likhogi, phir duniya ko pata chalega," and and then I just end up somewhere there, and I keep yelling, and Sara keeps listening. I pulled out something Sara wrote ages ago, maybe in her sophomore or junior year. It's an excerpt from a meditation on Sappho and Pakhtun women and love and friendship, all the things that make Sara Sara. This is slightly long, but I would like you guys to hear Sara way back when she was very little, but she still sounds so great. And this is just an excerpt from her essay. There is a fragment of Sappho's that reads like a prayer of sorts, a single line that says simply, "May you sleep on the breast of your delicate friend." Anne Carson, in a note, Sara, there's a typo in this, by the way. It's not, okay? It's note. Note to this fragment says that the word used for friendship, for friend here, means a close female companion or intimate friend in a relationship that may be sexual but is not commoditized. The female relationships I witnessed in my childhood were fundamentally characterized by a similar closeness, a complete lack of inhibition. And though marriage was seen as a fortunate inevitability, there was always an anxiety that belied the purity of the celebrations, an anxiety that I earlier mentioned I was reminded of by Sappho's poetry. The tearful lament of the departing woman who leaves against her will, "Oh, how badly things have turned out from us." Here she's citing a line from Sappho, is a fear that is echoed in many tappe, na Sara? Tappe, mourning. Tappe are a form of Pashtun poetry, mourning the lack of ownership women have of themselves. In one, the speaker says, so I'm not going to read out the Pashto part because it will be terribly embarrassing. In one, the woman says, "The body is mine, though ruled by others. Lord, take away these bonded bodies." In another, a married woman complains of her husband's cruelty for not only beating her, but also forbidding her from crying. Though certainly the celebration of marriage occurs because it carries the promise to fulfill desire and purpose, and it's almost inconceivable for a Pathan woman to never marry, there remains the dread that it could end in grief and the recognition that far more is at stake for the woman than for the man. The fear comes from the prospect of leaving the safe, the familiar, the known space of the purely feminine to enter a world that must be negotiated on male terms. I remember listening one Eid to an older woman from the village explaining how she was looking for a new wife for her husband to share the burden. He didn't used to be as violent before, but now that she was older, she knew he wanted another woman and more sons, and she couldn't afford to give him up entirely because her daughters were still unmarried. She was acting to save their marital prospects, but she saw only bleak futures for them even if she succeeded. And so, though brides are dressed and perfumed and girls all night long might sing, this is from Sappho again, girls all night long might sing of the love between you and the bride with violets in her lap, the departure, and the Sara's voice enters again, the departure is always crowned by tears. And yet, women marry and meet their fates and build new communities around the new facts of their life. I have seen no space more exclusively jealously feminine than the one surrounding the cradle of a newborn. Generations of women gather around the new mother and the conversation resumes its regular turn. There is a return of that intimacy and familiarity. In one of the most tender fragment moments, Sappho describes to her daughter her mother's headdress and wishes for her child crowns of blooming flowers. As I fit the pieces of Sappho that I have newly found together with the couplets of Tappe that I only lately discovered and the lives of women I have always known, I am reminded of Virginia Woolf and the extraordinarily true statement that she made in A Room of One's Own. We think through our mothers if we are women. We think through our mothers and our sisters, and somehow we find that there is something of a shared experience of femininity and feminine space that has persisted through millennia. We find somehow that our mothers and sisters in their longings and vulnerabilities are not altogether different from Sappho of Lesbos and her community of women. This is just one. This is Sara at maybe, I don't know, 17 or 18 or maybe 19, writing something that when I read now just sounds, again, out of the ballpark, and I'm wondering why this isn't published and why this isn't sitting in some, big magazine, and people aren't raving about it. But it is there, and perhaps I have pulled it in here to remind myself that kabhi na kabhi ये लड़की किताब लिख लेगी. So thank you guys, thank you all for listening, and those of you studying with Sara are terribly lucky. I wish I could too.
Thank you so much, both of you. I have in my notes a reminder to say thank you to Bilal, and now I have to, think a little harder, because it is difficult to find the words when you feel so seen and when you feel so appreciated, and that is something that Mariam has always done for me. Perhaps even more so because the being seen and the being loved is accompanied by the most well-deserved dant. And I like to think that the reason the dant continues is because she really does believe कि कभी किसी दिन मैं किताब लिख लूंगी, and it's her belief that helps me believe. um, right, I'm not going to spend too long on this because I feel like I may actually cry, but thank you very much to both of you for always making me feel so welcome and reminding me that all of my ambitions are not dead. Okay. There's a couple more thank yous. I wanted also to thank Zoha for that warm and wonderful and affirming talk. Only someone as talented as Zoha could make you feel hungry for bolognese on a day that feels like it's straight out of hell. And thank you to all of the other mentors for their craft talks over the past week. Much like Mariam, you give me hope that one of these days or one of these years, I will be either inspired or shamed into something approaching productivity. And honestly, I'll take either. This is the third year that we're mentoring the nonfiction workshop together, Zoha and I. And every year we look forward to meeting and working with a set of brilliant students. And every year the students are brilliant. But also to working with each other. For a week, we get to teach and mull over our students' work, swap reading lists, wander around campus, and grumble about AI and climate change and what aging feels like and what all of these new buildings are doing that are ruining this place that we lived in for 4 years. We chug buckets of iced coffee and we meet old friends and mentors, and we make plans to run someday idyllic writers' residencies for all of us present that no one will ever fund, and therefore we will probably never run. For a week, our brains gradually fuse together like Velcro, and then workshop finishes and our brains unvelcro, and we go home and we look forward to doing it all over again in 12 months' time. This year, with exactly zero pre-planning or consultation, Zoha and I discovered that we had decided to give the same craft talk. Or at least a craft talk about the same thing, community. I feel like Zoha has said everything that needs to be said about the value of friendship. So I'm not going to repeat that. But like an additional note, a week ago when I was still making haphazard notes on my phone between meetings, Zoha sent me her finished draft. It was moving and it was lovely, and it shared many concerns with the piece that I was attempting to map out. It also shared the exact same opening thought. All of which is to say, Zoha, please get out of my head, but also don't. And second, when the LUMS Young Writers Workshop says writing, learning, and community, we really, really mean it. Thank you all for being here today. While we, in expressing the vital importance of community to our writing practices, kind of just go on for a bit about how great our friends are. I hope you find it at least mildly instructive. So, there exists an abundance of advice on craft and writing. And as I'm sure you've surmised this week, as many ways to write as there are writers. I will be intentionally and unintentionally echoing some of the things you've heard already, by the way. There are as many ways to write as there are writers, more in fact, because it is so much easier to talk and write about writing than it is to just write. And after all, we love contradicting ourselves. Zoha spoke earlier about the myth of the lonely writer. When I was figuring out what I wanted to say here today, I was thinking a lot about that. Not as myth, but as fantasy. Last year, when I was making a point about the enviable military discipline of fan fiction writers, I hypothesized that many of us who become or hope to become writers find the roots of that ambition in slightly sad, slightly lonely childhoods. I recognize, of course, that like anything, this can't be universally true. But for the little lonely writer child, the figure of the solitary wordsmith in a cabin on a remote mountaintop can be an ideal. A manifestation of solitude that is a choice, drenched in glorious artistic purpose that will surely invite accolades and envy from the whole world. As a child, I'm a pleasure to have in Ma'am Shazia's class because I'm reading Wuthering Heights at home, while my 1.5 friends who did get permission to go to Pizza Hut after school are swapping Pokemon cards. But in 20 years, I will be Hemingway. And it's always fucking Hemingway. The thing is, whether or not you want to be Hemingway in particular, and who does really, the archetype, the abstraction of the lonely writer is built into the dream itself. At the very least, it is one of its many constituent parts. It's a fairly masculine ideal, not because there aren't women writers who swore by solitude as a prescription, but because it is difficult to imagine too many women through history who could afford the luxury of removing themselves from the world to pursue an individual desire. Ghar kaun sambhalega? Above all, it is a protective fantasy, absolving you from dependency on other people, creating distance, physical and emotional, suggesting that if only you could be truly by yourselves, truly with your thoughts, a book would just happen. Immaculate conception. Even now, during weeks when my job's a little too hard and the demands on my time are a little too high, and the books I spend my salary on surround me unread and accusing, my mind wanders wishfully to a mountaintop and a beautiful cottage where, of course, I would read and I would write. And away from the bothersome aspects of life, my book would be born so naturally. Except, of course, the truth is, if I, me, the person who daily broadcasts my every thought, feeling, and observation to no fewer than 8 WhatsApp groups, and separately to a bunch of people in those groups, if I was ever on a mountaintop with nothing to do but read and write for longer than a day or two, maybe a week, I would kill myself. Like, actually. I know there are people who thrive on solitude and writers who are their most productive when they are alone. But a little of this goes a long way. And what the fantasy of the lonely writer obscures is that turning towards words, reading them or writing them as a primary means of apprehending the universe, is not to turn away from people, but to try and establish connection on friendlier, more suitable terms. Certainly, solitude has not produced the only revered writers. Virginia Woolf had the Bloomsbury Group, J.R.R. Tolkien had C.S. Lewis, even Hemingway had Fitzgerald until he didn't. And archetype or not, he was deeply intellectually engaged with his contemporaries. If we step out of whiteness for a moment, as we always should, it is worth remembering that collectives are at the heart of literature in other parts of the world, including our own. There's the progressive writers movement, the whole tradition of the mushaira. I even saw a reel the other day in which Ali Sethi was talking about Farida Khanum, who was describing a time when she would hang out at the radio station with Fez, and Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan and Mehdi Hassan would be around doing their own thing somewhere nearby. Can you tell these are coming off the top of my head? I'm sorry. My point is, if it isn't solitude specifically that is essential to literary pursuit, perhaps we can say it is the optimization. I've been working in development too long, but it is the optimization of circumstances that are conducive to creativity, conducive to thought. The unfortunate or fortunate nature of the writer's malady is that nothing is immune to romanticization. I mean, for God's sake, I'm here to talk about texting. And now that I've put the lonely writer in his place, I want to look a little more closely at another much valorized tool in the writer's arsenal: the writer's journal. If the mountaintop is a luxury only to be dreamt of, the journal is the achievable essential. It's proof, visible, consistent, tangible. Look, I'm writing. I'm writing right now. And if everything is copy, all life is fodder for art, the journal is indispensable. Because what is a writer without an archive of thought? I am willing to admit that when it comes to the journal, I might be the problem. In fact, I'm sure I am. When in Miss Shazia's class, I took a break from Wuthering Heights and dreaming about my lonely writer's cottage where everything would finally be fine, I read the novel assigned in the curriculum. Harriet the Spy was a precocious 12-year-old who wanted to be a journalist, and of course, I saw myself in her. And Harriet wrote everything. She filled page on page of any number of journals because she was going to be a trademark real writer like me. Inspired by her and somewhat more morbidly by Anne Frank, I too decided to have a journal. I still have them. They're a stack of mostly empty diaries with sporadic entries only in the first quarter, each beginning with an apology. Dear Diary, I'm sorry I don't write as frequently as I should. Also, my grandfather died. Dear Diary, I'm sorry it's been. Yes. Actually, I will take advantage of that break to hand my phone to someone because it keeps buzzing, which is apt, I think. Um, Dear Diary, I'm sorry it's been so long. I think I'm going to fail Urdu. I am a disappointment. Dear Diary, I'm sorry I haven't written before this. Prison Break finished, but I missed the finale because I had typhoid. Again. Sometimes I wonder, what is the meaning of life? Dear Diary, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And every time I said, now I'll do better. But I didn't. And I still can't. Because the truth is, I am bored by my naked, decontextualized voice on the page. My thoughts live in my head, and I don't like seeing them loitering outdoors unless they're going somewhere. I'm not saying that a writer's journal is not of value. So much of what I have learned about writing, about anything, comes from the journals of writers I love and even writers I don't love. I am saying only that as a functional act, it does not help me write. The question that leaves me with then is, what is the function that a journal serves for others that it does not serve for me? How can I replace it and therefore offer those of you who also cannot abide your aimless interiority on a page an option to replace it? Friends that journal tell me the same thing my therapist does. It is a means of organizing thought. By laying out everything in prose in a corporeal archive, it becomes easier to sort through what is important and what is not, what is worthwhile and what is not. It becomes easier to look dispassionately upon lines of reasoning, observations, feelings, etc., all the raw material of our work, and build on them or discard them. It makes sense then that journaling doesn't work for me. My thoughts, like the rest of me, do not function well alone. In a recent conversation in one of the many WhatsApp groups, my friend said she finds herself alarmingly bereft of opinions. That she'll watch a movie and enjoy it, but have no thoughts about it afterwards, nothing to say. In a world where work and functional tasks occupy so much energy, mental and physical, and social media saps away what's left, that's not so unusual. Once you are no longer in a space that is built for discourse, school, college, workshop, there are few avenues for thought. And when she said that, I realized something similar. These days, I only have thoughts when I am actively in conversation. And I have all of my best thoughts around my best friends. This is not groundbreaking, I realize. It boils down to something quite basic. In the words of an alum of this workshop describing another fellowship he was part of, community का बहुत scene है यार. So instead of extolling the virtues of community or friendship, which many have done before me and much better, including Zoha, thank you, today I will describe the medium that serves as both community and archive in my life. The place where many of my friends, and I'm sorry, Mariam, almost all of my writing lives. WhatsApp. To begin with, WhatsApp is a textual medium. Yes, there are voice notes and pictures and those little video note things that put you in a circle that I haven't figured out yet. But if you're someone who likes text and words, it's a place you write. In sheer volume of words, it is the place I write the most. It's also the place that I enjoy writing the most. Because unlike other contexts, I'm reasonably sure that my audience, that is my friends, A, like me, and B, want to hear about my life. They want to hear about the excellent donut I had at PDC yesterday, which was not excellent actually, but it did taste like 2016, and that was fantastic. They want to hear about how I bartered a nearly stale cigarette for a 200 lira discount on a cab ride in Istanbul because apparently Erdogan has instituted a ban on flavored cigarettes, assuming, so I was told, that they encourage women to smoke. And the driver, who had just been casually swindling a random tourist, i.e., me, was so excited to try the blueberry switch he lit for me that he Google translated his request with one hand while smoking his own cigarette with the other, and the car was just merrily steering itself. And I was feeling so triumphant, so worldly, so very traveler that the group chat laughs at me, but they also laugh with me, and that makes it okay. They also want to hear about how my father is and how my mother is and how my therapy is going. And oh, yeah, I forgot your therapist left you. And if I've met any new cats. And it doesn't matter if we've had this conversation 100,000 times. They want to know. And I want to tell them. The them, of course, varies. Every group has a unique composition and a unique concern, even if members overlap. For instance, literature degree friendships is composed of the same people as clothes exclamation mark help exclamation mark. One of the best things about this classification system is that if a group chat survives long enough, it develops a kind of native philosophy, a manifesto. Dictums include things like skincare could be a scam and probably is, but wear your sunscreen anyway. Tweeting too much is a red flag. Avoid boys who are too much the intellectual type, especially the Marxist intellectual type, especially if rich. I see that resonated. Sometimes this follows the original purpose of the group's creation. In the early days of sanity check queens, conversations tended to reflect the sentiment, am I crazy? Or since then, there is a general growing consensus within the group that we are not, in fact, crazy, but we are documenting behaviors that certifiably are. Other times, the name of the group is just a ghost. Lesbian Kraut was an homage to a Fry and Laurie sketch. Rabia's laughing because she's in it. Was an homage to a Fry and Laurie sketch and now covers relationships, visa problems, short stories, long stories, annoying tweets, annoying people. It's an expansive list. The best way I have found to organize my thoughts are group chats. Because unlike a journal, people ask questions. So if you throw in a statement like, straight guys who are obsessed with really long, really shiny, really straight, sunsilk ishtiar kind of hair are looking for a mother, not a partner, you'll be able to really workshop that thought. First of all, what happened? To whom? How many times? What other underlying pathologies exist? When is this a forgivable position? And then, when all that's figured out and the conclusion is added to the manifesto, it becomes part of the group's collective consciousness until, of course, new information comes to light and we refine our conclusions. Group chats are also wonderful places if the denomination for your confession is chosen judiciously. As Zoha said, choose your friends carefully, guys, that matters. They allow you selectively to sometimes be your worst self, with the understanding that once you've said the petty, mean, vindictive thing, or the absolutely unhinged thing. For instance, my friend Rabia and I once came to the conclusion that if Zadie Smith had the benefit of our insights when she was a debut novelist, everything after White Teeth would have been so much better than it was. Um, and once it's out, you can laugh at it and tuck it away, out of sight, out of mind, and return to the world a saner person with better opinions. It's easier not to hate on the Twitter chick with the book deal if just once in a group with two other people, you've really, really hated on the Twitter chick with the book deal. WhatsApp conversations are a great place to have lowercase thoughts. When I sent Bilal the title for my talk, he said, "Can I edit it?" And like added all the capitals. And I said, "No, sorry, that's part of the point." Lowercase thoughts are thoughts that you don't have to take seriously, but that you can consider and cherry pick and return to and germinate until you either leave them behind forever or turn them into something that can exist outside the little green speech bubbles on your phone. My favorite thing about WhatsApp personally is that it is the over communicating, under rememberer's greatest archival asset. I rarely recall the exact things that people say or even that I say, but I always have some degree of conviction that they were said. So I use my little search bar to fact check, date check, price check, anything and everything, and it helps me win a lot of arguments. And less pleasantly achieve closure when I inadvertently, if confidently, lose one. It helps me remember the excellent things that have been said to me. For example, I did a little digging yesterday after Anika's wonderful talk and found where my dear friend Rabia, after I sent her a selfie in front of my workplace's bright orange and yellow blinds, asked me why I worked in a jumping castle. And without fail, most critically, every month on days that I feel overcome with rage or despair, or rage and despair, it reminds me that I need to wait a few days and my uterus will shed its lining and then peace will return to the world. Sometimes in the middle of a conversation, a friend will say, "Sara, this is an essay." And when I agree, they will not expect me to write the essay, which is okay, I think. Other times, writer friends will say, "These are good sentences, Sara. Stop wasting your sentences on WhatsApp. Put them in an essay." And recently, I've realized that I'm probably not going to write all the essays, but someday, when I write some of them, like this day and this essay, I already have my drafts. To conclude, I want to say that when it comes to writing, there is no substitute, as Eunice said the other day, for the reading and the writing. Those are the non negotiables. But even if you do not have access to a mountaintop, or you can never keep a journal, if you are in no way the writer that exists in your fantasy, if you are a person, you are doing something to archive your life and something to archive your thoughts. For me, it's WhatsApp. For you, you have to figure out what that is. And also buy cloud storage. Thank you.